What's the most disgusting thing you've ever found in your house? My wife went to clean a bathroom we don't normally use to prepare for a guest. She called me in and pointed to a maggot writhing on the toilet seat lid. We lifted the lid and there were more on the seat and about an inch of dead maggots in the bowl. Where did they come from? I looked up and noticed the exhaust fan was right above the toilet. I flipped the switch for the fan and cling clang maggots start raining down from above. Apparently a bird had died up in the vent and birthed this writhing mass of grey-white stinking devil worms. If the timing had been a little different, our guest could have been sitting on the toilet when I was cleaning under my son's bed one day and pulled out a raccoon tail. Thought it was weird, maybe part of a toy or a hat or something, until I realized it was a freshly skinned raccoon tail. I had a dog at the time who was fond of chasing raccoons out of the backyard. Guess she took a souvenir from one. I mean, it could be worse, until you mentioned the dog. I was thinking your son was skinning raccoons. I was absent-mindedly eating a plum, and I felt something wriggle in my mouth. Earwigs nested into the plum and I didn't notice. I swallowed maybe 3 and I couldn't bring myself to puke, which grossed me out even more, because they were inside my stomach. And done with Reddit for the day. We noticed a really bad smell upstairs, a mixture of crap and rotting corpse. We keep the house clean, so it was alarming. We traced it to the bathroom trash. There, we found what would forever be known as Sluggo. Sluggo was a wet sock full of rotting oatmeal. I had been suffering with a skin ailment and the doctor suggested oatmeal baths. Internet explained this as filling a sock with oatmeal, tying it closed and letting it float in the tub so you get the benefits without having oats stuck to you or clogging pipes. My fevered brain decided to throw the thing in the trash and forgot to take it out. It began to mold and by the time we found it, it was slimy and smelled like Satan's butthole. Now whenever we smell something bad, we exchange looks and whisper the name of the demon Sluggo. Holy frick, I am silently LMAO at work here. Oh god. I had a chest freezer that was used rarely, but was about 2/3 full of mostly freezer burnt food that should have been thrown out. We had a power outage, and the freezer did not turn back on when the power did. Found out about a month later when I opened it up. It was a soup of rotten meat mixed with spoiled ice cream and liquefied veggies. I had to clean it out. The house smelled for a week. At that point, you just buy a new one. Woke up in bed and felt something squishy. My cat brought in a rat and tore it apart, leaving its innards all over my blankets and floor. My cat was so thoughtful. He brought me a headless rabbit and left it under the kitchen table for my bare feet to find. Thanks, Floyd. I appreciate the thought. Mine located and killed 3 shrews and left them under the dining room table, lined up in a row all neat. I didn't know if I should be proud of his hunting skills or scared because it was supposed to be a threat. Piece of meat on the ground in the kitchen getting eaten by maggots. An onion that had stayed for so long that it had turned liquid and the place smelled like death weeks after it got cleaned up. That sounds disgusting. Meat should always stay in the refrigerator. I don't use my dresser very much, but it still had a bunch of old clothes in it. We knew that we had a bit of a mouse problem, so we'd set out poison. Getting ready in the morning one day, I found a dead baby mouse on the floor outside my room. I traced the poo trail back to my dresser. One drawer was open slightly, so I looked inside. I found a mouse nest with like 4 dead babies in my shirt drawer. Lots of old clothes had been chewed up to make the nest. I puked. This makes me both sad and nauseous. The freezer in my uni flat somehow turned off during the Easter holidays. I came back 2 weeks later to the worst smell ever. Flies everywhere. The cleanup was hideous. Packs of sausages blown up like balloons and green furry steaks, all floating in this brown stinking water. I threw up several times while cleaning it up and had a text message from the flat above asking what the smell was. One of my flatmates hadn't even gone home over the break. He just lived amongst the flies and the smell of decay for a fortnight. The fact that some dude could just live in that and not wonder WTF was happening is astonishing. Back when I was about 10 years old, my family lived in an oddly designed house in the foothills of the Sandia Mountains. It was actually a great location. The whole of Albuquerque could be seen from our deck, and there were literally miles of interesting desert to explore in every direction. But it wasn't without its unfortunate details. and one of them resulted in perhaps the most disgusting sort of discovery that I've ever had the misfortune of watching. Before I tell you what actually happened, I need to explain a couple of things. First of all, the slightly strange nature of the building's design meant that my bathroom, which I shared with my younger brother, was located in the exact center of the structure, albeit on the bottom floor. And secondly, that bathroom was shared, as I mentioned, by two pre-adolescent boys. As a result, it wasn't the cleanest area in the house, and the complete lack of natural light gave the entire space a perpetually yellow hue. Worse still than that, though, was the gag-inducing smell that would occasionally emanate from within. Whenever it got particularly potent, the aroma would actually seem to follow a person through the house, like some sort of scent-based specter that was heck-bent on making people throw up. My mother was convinced that the stench was the result of her sons having terrible habits when it came to keeping things clean, despite our repeated insistence that we'd thoroughly scrubbed every surface. Mind you, scrubbing usually amounted to wadding up some toilet paper, getting it wet, and then wiping away any visible stains that we might see. Things eventually got so bad that our father was conscripted into helping us, and, as he had been instructed to do, he led the endeavor with his nose. That was when he discovered that the smell was actually coming from a nearby heater vent. Needless to say, he wasted no time in opening up the space and investigating, at which point, literally dozens of corpses, those of mice, rats, birds, and maybe even the odd lizard, came tumbling out into the living room, looking for all the world like a decomposing avalanche of death. Some of the animals were little more than mummified skeletons, while others looked to be covered with festering, oozing sores. The smell, for the record, became so overpowering that we actually had to step outside before we could deal with the open-air graveyard. My brother and I felt vindicated by the whole thing, at least until our mother said that the deluge of rotting carcasses was still our fault, because we had failed to mention the fact that the smell was coming from outside the bathroom. TLDR. The smell coming from two boys' bathroom turned out to not be their fault. I'm annoyed that your mom blamed you guys, especially being that young. Those kind of smells that spread throughout the house can be so hard to find. Pulled up some insulation in the attic and found so many mouse droppings. It looked like someone dumped a Costco-sized box of Cocoa Krispies. Thanks for ruining that cereal for us all. When my grandfather died, we cleaned out his house. I had to clean the fridge. I found an old mustard package that was completely black and had expired roughly 30 years ago. My parents found some 10-year-old cheese in the very back of a kitchen cabinet when they bought a new oven. Where did the cheese come from, you ask? When I was young, maybe 3 or 4, they discovered that there were mice in the cabinet. My dad set some traps to kill them, but I wanted to feed the mouse, and I learned from Tom and Jerry that mice love cheese. So, I put some cheese in the cabinet for the mouse. I guess the mice died before they got to the cheese that I left for them. The cheese touch is real. Had a silverfish problem once. It was dark. I went to pee, looked down and saw one feeling up my toe with its whiskers. Also saw one slowly coming out of the bathtub drain. I got my bathroom completely redone last year and I don't know what the construction people did, but there are 1-4 silverfish in my tub every night. I live with a super disgusting flatmate while I'm finally dealing with her now. She was beyond gross and at times like completely batshit hoarder levels. I've just ignored her as I'm only occasionally in the flat. I might put up pictures later. I put up with it because the rent is like 50% cheaper than it should be for the location I live in, and the UK is like super expensive in terms of rent. She rendered her own bedroom uninhabitable through her corruption, thus sleeps in the living room. And she was infesting the living room, rendering that uninhabitable too. I just hid in my bedroom and left everything else well alone as much as I could. But yes, the most gross. There have been many. She infested the flat with big nasty black flies. I would keep my bedroom door closed most of the time, so I was largely unaffected, but this time the flat was swarming with flies. I would blast them with an electric flea swatter or just smash them. But the whole flat stank, so it was hard to find what caused the smell. I noticed the flies I killed were full of blood. She was surprisingly no help. No matter how much I insisted the flies were her doing, she would say it has to be you Pebbles, I don't notice them. I was having a bath one day and I killed all the flies in the bathroom prior, but as I washed myself I noticed flies buzzing everywhere again, so I knew the source had to be close. They were coming from around the side of the toilet from a small bin. I opened it and what I saw was horrendous. So she'd been putting her used tampons in that bin and left them for a very long time. What was in there was black rotting blood and a pile of maggots and hatching flies. So yeah, I did yell at her for that. Sometimes it feels like I'm living a real life Binding of Isaac playthrough. For the sake of your health and sanity, please start trying to find a new place to live. Holy heck, that's horrendous. My dorm in college, but close enough. I made some soup the day before winter break while playing some games. Forgot about the soup. Came back from winter break and it was just awful. I can't even describe the smell. Luckily I was the first person back in my floor so I could clean up without people thinking I was the actual worst. Does classroom count? A frog jumped out of his habitat over New Year's break and leapt his way to underneath one of the giant bookcases set up in my old classroom. We didn't find him until the end of the year when we were moving everything around. The frog had mummified. The kids were a mix of revolted and fascinated. Roommate and I went shopping shortly after getting a new apartment and subsequently forgot about the bag of potatoes we stashed in the cupboard above the stove. Fast forward 6 months or so and I start to notice the kitchen smells pretty bad, so I do some exploration. The first and only clue I needed was seeing a brown, syrupy liquid dripping out of the cupboard. The potatoes had almost entirely liquefied and the fluid seeped out of the bag, gluing it to THR cupboard. The smell haunts me still. What followed was an hour's worth of soaking, scrubbing, and gagging trying to get the smell out of the kitchen. Liquefied potatoes are one of the worst smells ever. Not my house but my boyfriend's apartment. I found a half of a chicken sandwich, petrified under the couch while moving things around. It belonged to his roommate, and he always wondered what had happened to it. How do you just lose half of your dinner? I don't know how people give up looking for something like that. If I lose a chip or a piece of popcorn I'm snacking on, I tear the couch apart to find that bastard and throw it away, eat it depending on the amount of nasty on it. I live in a duplex. The people below me are pretty gross from what I can tell. Last year, around the time they moved in, we started developing a roach problem. Not the big ones, the little ones, but gross nonetheless. We're pretty clean people. Couldn't so much as leave whatever you cooked on the stove for a few seconds without a roach or two running towards it. They came out at all hours. We tried everything and could not get rid of them. One day I was cleaning my Keurig and noticed a roach corpse. Decided to take it apart, like not just the tank, unscrew the actual bottom and side portions, and holy heck, so many roaches, larvae, etc. Apparently, they really like the constant water reservoir and warmth. Literally bashed the Keurig with a hammer and will now only use a French press. TLDR, I've definitely ingested some form of roach in my coffee. At first I thought you meant you decided to take the roach apart. Was looking forward to some scientific investigation. I have to clean out my shower drain about every month. Last one had a combination of vomit, jizz, blood and Play-Doh attached to the hair clump. Probably the most disgusting thing I have seen in my home. I am pretty sure I know where each came from. I have 4 adults and a kiddo in my home. It all came from Uncle Bernie. I was home one night and my daughter was getting ready to take a shower. She called out, "Mom, there's a snake in the bathroom. We have a fake rubber snake that we used to hid around the house." And I thought she was trying to fool me. I walked into the bathroom, and there is a snake approximately 5 feet long. Husband is working that night and I freaked out. I called our neighbor who came over wearing gloves. He removed the snake and I thought perhaps one of the kids had left the back door open. A few days go by. I'm in the basement and I see another snake. I freak out again, but luckily hubby is home to take care of it. A few days later I see my cat playing with yet another snake in the house. In a 2-week period we found at least 5 snakes in the house. The kids did not leave the door open, so I'm stumped as to how they got into the house. There is a pipe in the basement coming up from the floor. We put a heavy brick over it, and since then we haven't had any snake issues. Could be a nest of garter snakes in under around your house. They hibernate through winter in huge piles. When I lived with my dad, we had a sort of permanent roach infestation that was pretty gross. You'd find them dead on the floor and stuff like that, but it usually wasn't too bad. Until it was. I was reading a book in the living room, and all of a sudden a cockroach fell down right in between the pages and started crawling towards me. I screamed, slammed the book shut and chucked it across the room. As it turns out, I happened to be sitting under an air vent and one of those things slipped and fell through. I never sit under air vents now. I found a little hole in the wall where a cockroach skittered into while I was trying to catch it. I patched it over with tape and a paper towel, then told my dad, but he never did anything about it. I don't want to think about what could be behind that wall. I was going to sleep in my bedroom, which had a wood flooring. In the darkness, I thought I could hear something, and when I turned on the light I saw this huge roach sitting right next to my bed. I didn't have a cup handy, and by the time I ran to the kitchen and came back, it was gone. I never found it again, but I kept hearing those skittering sounds in my room. Luckily I was moving out in a week or so I slept on a couch until then. All this did lead to one good thing. I have a very strong motivation to keep my stuff clean. I don't ever want to see a cockroach again, if I can help it. Living in Florida we had some bad roaches. The couch was where one crawled up my foot. Didn't sleep on couches for a good while. Also found them in frosted flakes, and then once in my shoe, which was found with my foot, which is the worst way to find it. Looked inside my shoes after that before putting them on. One time my brother forgot about a container of food in his backpack that stayed all summer long. He finally cleaned it out and it was infested with maggots. Oh god, thinking about it being a sealed container and there's already fly eggs in there and never gonna eat anything again. We moved into an apartment with a garbage disposal. We barely use it, but I guess there was some meat sitting in there from the previous owners, and 3 months in we saw maggots coming out of the sink. We flushed them off with hot water and chlorine, but it was gross. You don't have to have meat to have maggots. Some flies probably do exclusively lay eggs in meat, but you can have maggots on anything edible to them, from food items of all sorts to such delicious fare as diapers in an open trash can. I kept smelling something funky emanating from the kitchen but couldn't find the source. The kitchen itself was spotless. No trash in the bin. No dirty dishes. I was mystified. Well, I very rarely use our microwave. I finally opened it trying to find the smell. Sitting on a plate was what appeared to be something resembling a chicken breast, and it was freaking moving. Apparently, my husband had defrosted chicken for his lunch like a week prior and then completely forgot about it. So it sat rotting in the microwave and was covered in undulating maggots. I threw up and then had to clean up the awful mess because at that point he was out of town and I couldn't let it sit there any longer. It was horrid. A fishing spider. One of the biggest spiders in the US. The spider was gigantic. Its body was the size of a mouse, and it somehow got inside. I just think about being asleep and one crawling on me. Oh, you can bet it did. Probably took a nap on your face in the middle of the night, little legs twitching from its little dreams. Buddy of mine kept a reserve stash of McDonald's Filet-O-Fish sandwiches underneath his mattress to eat whenever he felt hungry, and under my mattress, and hidden in another buddy's cabinets. Some of these were weeks old. He didn't care. He never got sick. He loved to pull them out in the middle of conversations and eat them. On payday, he'd go back to McD's, order another 20 or so, and proceed to rehide them for later. Just, wow. Not my house, but stayed at a friend's frequently. Outdoor cat killed a rabbit and made a collage of rabbit organs on the doormat right outside the front door. Once reached into a bag of Doritos to find out that it was wet. Like, nearly sopping wet. I figured someone had spilt something and was about to take a bite when I noticed the smell emanating from it. Apparently, a mouse had visited in the middle of the night and peed in our open bag of Doritos. We also later found his corpse in my sister's dresser, along with a good amount of crap pellets and a single half-eaten cheese nip. I'm not sure which is more disgusting, the mouse pee in your snack, or the fact that you were going to eat a Dorito that was sopping wet with an unknown liquid. I was at my friend's house and she kept talking about a weird smell coming from her closet. We couldn't figure out what it was until we staring really digging around in there. In the back corner we found this pile of mush, blood and feathers. It was a dead bird that her cat must have brought in and left in there. My stalker. I should preface this by saying that I spoke to this girl once at a party about banal crap like the weather. I never touched her or indicated in any way that I wanted anything to do with her romantically or sexually. I was just trying to be polite. When I was in college, a girl that had been following me around for a few months finally broke into my apartment. I'm assuming her intent was to seduce me or something when I got home from the bars downtown, because she was mostly undressed when I got there. She was so drunk she had to be carried out of my house, and she left more vomit in my room bathroom than I thought was possible from one human body. I think she also peed a little on the floor, but at least it was tile. And if you're thinking at least you got to see her half naked, then think again. She looked like the love child of a scarecrow that fricked a manatee. Mean, I know. But this woman broke into my house and forced me to clean up vomit and pee for over an hour when all I wanted to do was sleep. Looking back, I'm amazed I didn't press charges. Dude, that's disturbing, disgusting AF. This may get buried, but I found my older brother's old fleshlight story. My brother was moving out for college and he had the biggest room in the house. Plus it was on the opposite side the house, furthest away from my mom's room. He had left and I was moving in. I went to clean out the closet and in the back corner there was this silver flashlight looking container. Confused that it wasn't a working flashlight, I untwisted the end and made the terrible discovery. It was a flashlight that showed it had been heavily used and smelled so bad I cannot even describe it. I was disgusted and almost puked. Ended up throwing it away and never mentioning it to anyone ever, including my brother. Maggots coming from nowhere. Then we found where my 4-year-old was hiding her food so she could skip right to dessert, lol. Not really found but saw. We had a watermelon that we'd bought that must have been overdue by the time we got it. A week after keeping it, we're talking in the kitchen and we hear a sound like a tree falling. Crunch. As it splits itself in half and spills rotten watermelon everywhere. The smell was RNCID. I've told this story before on here, but whatever. I walked into produce one morning and it smelled like dead fish. Very old dead fish. Asked the depot manager what the frick it was and he told me it was a watermelon that exploded. I cleaned out the trap in my dishwasher, the filter that catches food and debris, after ignoring it for several years. Life pro tip: you either clean that thing on the regular, or you never clean it at all. The substances I extracted from it haunt me to this day. I didn't even know dishwashers had that sort of thing. I'm a little scared to check my dishwasher since I'm in a rental. My wife was out of town so the trash didn't have to be taken out as soon as usual. I had tossed a bunch of melon rinds in it. A few days later I go to pull the trash bag out and a swarm of maggots came piling out onto the floor. Those things are fast. Not a house story but the car. My wife had gone grocery shopping and put them in her trunk. I guess a bag of carrots had fallen out of one of those plastic bags because when I went to clean her car I found the carrots. They had turned to dark brown liquid with green tops floating in it. It must have been in there for about a year. We had a senior woman sitting for us to watch over our pets. Nice woman, very dependable. However, at some point she did a Hershey squirt in our bed without realizing it. We found it though. Centipedes trapped in the shower or sink in the morning. Giant spiders trapped on glow traps in the basement. In college, every year we invited friends over for a turducken feast right around Thanksgiving. One year, right when the turducken finished cooking in the oven, I peeked under said oven and found a cooked rat. Well, sitting upright. Decided not to reveal that bit to the feast goers, but one of us had to clean it up the next day. We had some friends who would host a turducken party each year. In this instance, I'm really hoping it's not a small world and I wasn't in attendance to this particular rat flavor scented turducken feast. Oldest son came into my room early one morning and woke me up with, "I need to shower in your bathroom." Something bad happened in our bathroom. Dread. I got up to make coffee, started the lunches. Son came downstairs for breakfast and just as I asked, "How bad is it?" Really, I heard middle son get up and walk to the bathroom. We waited. Moments later, middle son called down, "Mom, I think there's, is it called explosive diarrhea?" I remember thinking, okay, how bad can it really be? I've cleaned up a few toilets in my career as a mom. So I poured a cup of coffee, set some bleach on the counter. Middle son came downstairs, pulled up to the counter, Okay, how bad is it? Well, he finished his bite of waffle. I thought it was a prank, you know, but then I smelled it. Go on. I dug under the sink for rubber gloves. It's everywhere. On the seat. Older son nodded in agreement. Fine. I've dealt with that before. And the floor. Oh. And the wall. I mean, it's like balloons filled with poop just exploded. They were not exaggerating. After I found a mask, I went into the bathroom and it looked like a Jackson Pollock painting made of poop. My youngest had terrible diarrhea in the night and didn't turn on the light in the bathroom and at some point tried to clean it up. I don't think we will ever really know what happened, but I had to cover my feet with plastic bags and air out the house for an entire day. All that from a 60-pound boy with a stomach virus. Roach King came waltzing into my bedroom. It was as big as a centipede. I swear it had 100k HP. And it was fast. Faster than me. I screamed and grabbed my raid but couldn't get close enough. I was yelling so loud I'm sure my neighbors called the police. I lived in a roach infested apartment for 2 years. Roaches are the worst freaking thing to live with. I've woken up with them crushed underneath me in my bed. I've eaten half a bowl of cereal only to find one floating in it. And they've repeatedly fallen off of the ceiling on top of me. It should be a freaking human rights violation to run an apartment complex and not treat for pests on the regular when you know there's an infestation. But this was low income housing, so I guess they just couldn't afford regular exterminators. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.